In Vietnamese traditions, there are two very important dates in a person's life. One is when you're born, and then the other is when you pass away. I immigrated to the United States in the 70s, I think it was 1973. I served as an interpreter during the Vietnam War and met a American civilian working in Vietnam and got married.
I came to the U.S. in the early 80s. My sister-in-law sponsored our family here. And we came right in Tacoma, and we settled in Tacoma and live until now. Never move anywhere.
When first came to Irish Settlement in America in 1987 in San Jose, California. And after 6 months stayed there, I came to visit a friend up here, and right away I fall in love with this city.
When I first arrived in Tacoma, the Vietnamese community was much smaller than what it is today. From my observation, everyone was pretty scattered and doing things by themselves, and there was not a sense of cohesiveness or close community the way it is now. During the late 80s or beginning of the 90s, there were more of an effort to reunite the families who have settled here with the people who are still waiting in Vietnam and who used to work for the American government.
I, want to take the moment to honor Mr. Huỳnh Tấn Tuân, who devote all his life for the community here. And he also, why you see a lot of Vietnamese here, because he sponsored probably about 300 or 400 families from Vietnam here.
And they would write letters to my dad asking them to help with their paperwork. He got really good at figuring out the rentals in the area that they could rent apartments and getting them started kind of for their first year or so.
I was able to meet with several community leaders in the city, like Tuyết Nguyên and Phúc Nguyên and Mr. Tuân, who were very active in helping to relocate family to Tacoma. Through the year, we observed that people were getting older, and they were started, to passing away, and there was this worry that they don't know what's going to happen to them after they die.
At that time, if you're low income, if you pass away or somebody in your family passed away, usually the Department of Social and Health Services, they pay for all funeral services. However, I remember the early 90s is the time that they end that program.
Many families, when they first arrived, were not wealthy, and it was a struggle for them to have a proper burial and memorial service for these folks. So we were concerned about that, and we were looking at different ways to help alleviate the situation.
One of the family came to me and crying because his wife passed away and he didn't have any money to take care of the funeral.
Tuân, Tuyết, and me we asking contribution around the Vietnamese business town that's very tiny at that time. So that we came up with not enough money to help her, and so we asking other people who are willing to contribute it.
But later on, we actually collect enough money to help with the funeral.
And after the funeral, we sit down and talk about how we helped with the people in the future.
Funeral affair is very important in our community as a Vietnamese. And so for them to come to a new country and have to get used to everything, and so here you don't know when you die, who can take care of you? And so that's why we created the association to affirm with the community, don't worry, I visit all the cemetery, and when I went to Mountain View, I remember we got a lot of good support from that company. The two people I remember very well at this time is Ed Arnold. He's the one at that time is a funeral director, and also Cindy Thompson is the owner of the company. And so she very kind.
Give big credit to Ed Arnold and Tuyết Nguyen. They are the two that roll their sleeve and sit down and working, and that create the cemetery.
There was a phone call came in when I was on counselor duty during the day, and it was Tuyết calling in to have a director come out and meet with them. So I got a hold of her and we got everything lined up.
In the beginning, the Mountain View set aside 500 plots for the Vietnamese community at a very reasonable cost. It's $300 for the plot plus $45 for maintenance fee.
However, at that time, even $345, nobody had money to pay for it. And so we went back to Mountain View. I remember I asked Cindy at that time, I said, can you let us to make a payment? Whoever buy a lot, can they make a payment? $10 per month. And she said, $10 per month, I cannot hire my people to collect $10 per month. And so why don't you guys collect it yourself? And we will sign the contract through the council. And so we start with 100 family. And so at that time, with 100 family, each family paid $10.
All the money we have, we open an account with the bank and we put the money in there that we don't keep any money. And whenever a member passes away, we withdraw the money and give it to family. And then we collect another $10 from member for a reserve plan. After we growing a little more than 200, I think, so we register with the state.
So later on, Cindy saw us, we done very well, and so she said, okay, I will give you another 500 lot. And so totally 1,000 lot.
We had a lot of trips to Seattle because of the upright marker, and then developing all the markers that you see here are all the same color. Everybody has the same color marker, and that way there's no distinguishing between rank.
This association is a very, it's one of the kind. You probably don't find any association like this association because we base it on family. And so if you have a family of 5 people, then all 5 people would benefit from this association.
So when there's a death in the community, first the board of directors will reach out to the family and ask them if there's anything they need help immediately, and go from there. And of course, we contact Mountain View to inform them that we're going to have someone to be buried. And then the block leader would take time to go out and collect $10 from every member of the association. And then of course, depending on the religions of the one who died, then we will make arrangement for either a monk or a minister or a priest to conduct the service, both in the temple or a church, and then also out there at the graveside service.
I remember that something very tragic happened in the community.
I remember the incident well. I think that the shooting happened the night of the 4th of July. And on the 5th, I got a phone call from Tuyết telling me about that's what happened. One of the members, Mrs. Bong, 2 sons were killed with a victim of the incident. And there was another Vietnamese young man from a different family that also got killed. And then the waitress, who was also Vietnamese, there was 4 Vietnamese people killed during that time.
Thì mình từ cái hội đó, nhờ cái hội đó mà khi con của cô hai đó từng ở từng dưới nằm xuống được ấm đốm là nhờ anh Tuân trong hội lo. Trong đó có anh Tuân, chị Tuyết, ông Phúc lo giùm cho hội nói gia đình cô coi như không biết gì hết. Cô qua ngày 22 tháng 4 năm 1993, anh Huỳnh Tấn Tuân bảo trợ cho cô, gia đình cô. Gia đình cô hồi nói qua là 5 đứa con và 2 vợ chồng là 7 người. Thì khi hai cháu nó mất như vậy là một cái sự bất ngờ, một cái sự đau xót cho gia đình. Thì gia đình không biết làm như thế nào. Thì họ lo hết từ A tới Z. Nói đúng hồi đó thì khi Hậu lập ra thì cô có mua 2 miếng đất là cho hai vợ chồng. Mình nghĩ mình già rồi mà, thì mình mua 2 miếng đất để mà lo hậu sự cho vợ chồng. Nhưng mà khi xảy ra việc đó rồi, 2 cái miếng đất là mình để cho 2 đứa nó làm.
We were just devastated over what happened. Nothing like that had ever happened before, and so we tried to reach out to the family and supported them and make arrangement for the services of the victims.
Nhưng mà trong cái lúc đó thì Hội lo tất cả, từ cái vấn đề mà lo hậu sự cho mấy cháu á, đi ra Mountain View làm giấy làm tờ, nó thiệt tình không có còn cái tinh thần đấy mà nghĩ tới cái gì này. Thì Hội lo đi, mình chỉ biết mình mất 2 đứa con là mình đau lòng, nhưng mà cũng cảm ơn Hội, cảm ơn tất cả anh em ở trong cái Tacoma này đã cùng chung mà lo giùm cái hậu sự cho con của cô. Cách đây là năm nay đã 24 năm, thì cái ơn đó mình nhớ hoài.
The most important thing is to provide a proper, dignified resting place for all of the Vietnamese who wanted to be part of that. And so it doesn't matter whether you are Protestant, Catholic, or Buddhist, you pass on, you're all the same. You know, you believe in different God or different creator, but here's this place, you're welcome to come and join.
If the member is Catholic, they usually have the memorial service at the Catholic Church. And I think 90% of the people who Catholic prefer burial, but the Buddhists, most of them prefer cremation. So that's a little bit different that way. The Vietnamese really, strongly honor their ancestor.
The board of directors will follow that tradition, work with the family and see what they want to do. And we have priests out there at the cemetery. We have Buddhist monk, and we have Protestant minister doing all of the proper services out there at the cemetery. Our vision at that time was perhaps having a place where the Vietnamese people can come and pay tribute to their ancestor, the departed loved one, and see that they are together with their countrymen, so to speak. And so we thought if we have a Vietnamese burial place together like that, and after the people have died and passed on, their grandchildren or children can still come and visit and just say, these are like the Vietnamese people who all left the country for similar reason. And even though they are no longer here, but we know that they've been here and we can remember that.
Tất cả mọi người đều tôn trọng nhau, và đến mặc dù khi mà Hội Tương Trợ tổ chức những đại hội thì tổ chức theo truyền thống của văn hóa người Việt Nam, có nghĩa là cũng dâng hương, cũng kèn trống, cũng cúng tế, cũng này kia nọ, nhưng mà đó là cái văn hóa của người Việt Nam, và tất cả đều coi như là tôn trọng cái văn hóa của mình, và vì vậy đó mà mọi người đến với nhau ở trong tình thương. Nếu mà tôi được hỏi về cái suy nghĩ của cá nhân mình đó, thì tôi có thể nói rằng là tất cả mọi người đều như nhau. Tất cả mọi tôn giáo mà đó là con đường mà họ chọn. Bởi vì tất cả mọi người đều có sự tự do. Và mình phải tôn trọng sự tự do của mọi người. cũng như người ta tôn trọng sự tự do của chính mình. Tôi rất là vui để mà khi kể lại, nói lại về bác Huỳnh Tấn Tuân, bởi vì bây giờ bác không còn nữa. Nhưng mà tôi tin chắc chắn một điều rằng là bác vẫn còn ở trong trái tim của đa số ở tại cái vùng đất Tacoma này.
War can tear people apart in so many ways, and so I feel like my dad, like from the day he got here, was always finding ways to connect people and support people.
He was a former chief of police in Vietnam, and he came to the United States with his family with probably nothing. He became a custodian in Tacoma School District, where he worked all his life until he retired.
Before the Vietnamese associations existed, my dad had a long history of helping to sponsor individuals over. Usually they would, send birth certificates and send all the documentation needed to help sponsor someone over. And my dad, whether he knew the person or not, he would help facilitate however he could.
He would go out and try to rent houses for them and to furnish the homes with used furniture that he'd been able to gather, and then help them establish a solid foundation as they begin their family.
My dad kept files of every person that he sponsored over. And it's really interesting if you look through, because you see these people's lives, like their marriages and their births and their kids.
He was relentless in his effort to making sure that the cemetery was accomplished and negotiate with the Mountain View folks.
Mr. Nguyen would be in almost every family arrangement to have a burial here in Mountain View. He'd be a really likable man.
My dad was chairman of the group and really supported by a very large board. People elected my dad into that role because of their trust in him.
He's a figure that, with his kindness and devote, sacrifice for the community is, I don't think anybody who can do better than him.
One time that he was in the hospital about 6 years ago, we came to visit him. At that time, his illness is very critical, and we think that this is the last time we visit him. But when we went there, the first question he asked, how the organization?
My dad's funeral, it was 3 days, and everyone came to support. We had many community members come out and share their stories about my dad and their memories about my dad and how my dad impacted their lives.
When he passed away, I lost a big brother.
He took the right next step, and he did that to the best of his ability, to the full extent of his ability, before he moved on, to a next endeavor. And I think that's why so many people appreciate him, because he really gave all of his heart, and I think people just found that genuineness.
I think the community here is also pretty together, and also the Vietnamese community for mutual support is also big. You cannot find any association have that many paid member join together with responsibility.
I know that through the years, I think the presence of the Vietnamese community have become more prevalent, and then that's why we have been able to have different governors who come and participate in a different annual event here.
I'm just glad that I was the one that took the phone call, so that I was able to help the community set it up and then make friends with the board, and we've been friends ever since. I live about 3/4 of a mile from Phuc. He brings me food, and his wife's a good cook.
A lot of time I went to the market or everywhere, and the people say hi to me, talk to me, and then that my children said that you like the mafia boss. You know everyone know you.
I feel proud because I could just see, the achievement that my country people have been able to accomplish. I'm not a Vietnamese refugee the sense that the other members are, but they left everything and they come here and succeed and be contributors to the new community. After the Trondheim massacre, we thought that we have not done enough to bring the community together, the different generations. We are trying to establish a scholarship in Mr. Thuen's name. We want to remember him, we want to recognize and validate his legacy that he had made for the Vietnamese community here.
I think a lot of things change because it seems like everybody do well on their own. I'm not sure they would need the community to support them. But I still feel like, you know, together, our voice always can be stronger. But you can't believe it right now, the cost is increased so much. At least right now, is the basic burial is probably about $12,000. But luckily that we have 1,200 family join us now, and so we have enough to cover the funeral costs for most of the family.
So right now, that's only me and 2 other people who do all the financial collecting and paperwork.
Even right now, you know, see a lot of 30, 40 years old join the association. When the COVID is a lot of older people who either pass away or they are afraid of the, you know, COVID, and so they quit. So right now we have a really hard time to get volunteer.
They want us to continue, even that we say, well, we are getting old and we have to think about it to retire, but they said that not yet.
We want to pass on to the next generation, you know, and so they can continue, even they don't need it. But this is something to get the community together.
That I may be sick or die, but as long as I can stand on my feet, I continue to work for my community.